Hey guys, this is Ro, and today I want to talk a little bit about switches in Unity and Wise. The best way that I can describe how a switch works is if you think on a light switch. If you turn the switch on, the electricity is going to go through directly into the lamp, and then we're going to have light, right? So the principle is the same. If you set a switch to act with a certain variable inside the game, so let's say that you want switch A to work with variable B, then the C sound is going to play. That's how this works inside of Wise. So in this situation, I'm going to use explosions because I have an explosion for my player, an explosion for my enemies, and an explosion for the asteroids. And they're all a little bit different, right? A little bit stony explosion for the asteroid, a little bit more like sci-fi-ish for the enemy, and a very big explosion for the player because it's going to only play once every time you restart the level, right? So what we have here is a switch container, right? And we need to assign a switch game sync. In this situation, I used the switch group explosion state, and then I have asteroid, enemy, and player. These are going to be the triggers inside my light switch that are going to allow the electricity, or in this case, the sounds in this container to go through to the lamp or the Unity engine. So let's check it out how this works in Unity. So to send it to Unity, I've used only one event because I don't want to create explosion, enemy, explosion, asteroid, explosion, player. 3 events that are basically the same. In this situation, I can use the game sync. It would be the same as if you're doing footsteps and the materials are different, right? So you have dirt, you have gravel, you have grass, you have water, you have wood, metal, whatever. It works the same way, but in this situation, I tried to do it on a different aspect. So let's go to Unity and check it out. So in the Unity project, we have this destroy by contact script, which works as the way that calls for the destruction of an object when it's in contact with another. So if we check this out inside the script in Visual Studio, we can see that on trigger enter here, on this function here, we are setting a collider with the name of other. So inside our scene, every time that we see a collider, which works as a trigger in most of our cases, we are starting conditions. And these conditions are what define the way that we can call for different switches. So here, the original one we had, if explosion is different than null, which means that if we do have an explosion, and for example, let's go to our enemy ship prefab, we can see here in destroy by contact that our explosion is explosion enemy. It's another prefab inside here. And then we have an explosion player that I will talk about in a second. But if we do have something happening in our explosion game object, which is set here, then we want something to happen. So we want to instantiate an explosion. And this explosion is the same game object that we set here. So it's a prefab. It's going to give you some visual feedback. But at the same time, we want to have some audio feedback, right? So what I did was I went to check the name of this object, of this game object called explosion that I've set up as public in my script. So if my game object here is explosion enemy, I want my AK sound engine to set a new switch. So in the explosion states switch group, which is this one, right? In the explosion state, and it's exactly the same name, I want my asteroid switch to be triggered. And because of that, I want my sound engine to post an event after this with an explosion. So every single time that I'm hitting a trigger inside of the game, I'm going to instantiate an explosion depending on the explosion prefab, either asteroid or enemy explosion, and I'm going to set the switch group to a specific switch and play an event. So I did the same thing with the enemy, but if we had more, we would have to instantiate to create more conditions for this specific situation. So lastly, if I'm comparing the tag of my collider, and the tag is player, so my playable character, I'm going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to instantiate my player explosion, this one. And when I'm instantiating my player explosion, I just simply want to set switch to player, and I want my event to be called, right? So let's see how this works inside of Unity. All right, so again, if I destroy my asteroids or my player dies, the explosions are different, right? But if I kill my spaceship, the events that are being called and the switches that are being changed are pretty evident. A more sci-fi explosion, a more rocky explosion, and then when I die, a bigger, more visible, a more audibly different explosion. So this was one way that we can use switches and switch groups inside of Unity and Wwise, and there's other ways you can add switches by components to a trigger, for example, by using the AK switch. But I wanted to try more in this specific option. If you have any comments or feedback, please do so below. They are most welcome. And if you have any questions or doubts, contact me via YouTube or via my email. So thank you for watching and have a good one.